we could agree already. We could agree that each presentation will take maybe maximum 20 minutes. I think that's enough for any presentation, and that would allow us enough time to have a debate also. But I will be strict on the 20 minutes, please, or maybe better 17 minutes, 18 minutes will be a bit safer. Okay. All right, very well. I think I'm going to start. I welcome you all. This is the panel on endurance of post-Cold War conflicts in Eurasia. What, whys, and hows. I'm Ricardo Sousa. I'm one of the professors here at Universidade Autónoma de Lisboa. I welcome you all. Apparently, we have 3 of the 5 presenters already in the room, and we will follow the order of in the program. So for that reason, I will ask Katsiaryna Lozka to make her presentation on Between Independence and Creeping Absorption, the Viability of Post-Soviet de facto states. So the floor is yours for 17 minutes, maybe something like that.
Yeah, I think I'll go shorter, but yes, I'm going to share my screen. Can you see my screen? Yeah, okay, perfect. Yes. Thanks a lot for the introduction and the pleasure to be on this panel. So in my talk, I will present my work in progress, part of my PhD. This is part of my review article where I will try to open the puzzle, maybe even rather than try to answer it, as you will see. So the title of my presentation is Between Independence and Creeping Absorption, the Viability of the Post-Soviet de facto states. And on the first day of our conference, we already touched a bit on the post-Soviet de facto states in the presentation of Abkhazia's geopolitical roles. You'll see that my presentation takes quite a different direction, but there are some overlaps in the arguments as well. So against the backdrop of the long-term existence of de facto states, the past decades have seen really an increase in academic studies that discuss their geopolitical roles, that discuss their relations with parent states, with patron states, the internal characteristics of these entities. As a result, from the image of the black boxes of criminal entities that threaten the territorial integrity of their parent states, de facto states have become recognized as a long-lasting feature, but also a challenge to regional and international security and stability. So naturally, the interest in the study of the states has grown. At the same time, a number of scholars in this field have highlighted, have expressed have voiced their concerns regarding the mainstream direction that these studies have taken. In particular, Lawrence Breuers argues that de facto state scholarship is still dominated by the analysis of de facto states in terms of what they symbolize rather than what they are. So there's still a tendency to look at the de facto states, especially in the post-Soviet space, as geopolitical pawns, that are deprived of the agency of their own. Another group of scholars problematizes the acts of geopolitical homogenization in understanding the post-Soviet de facto states that, as they argue, obscures their dissimilarities. So indeed, there is a big tendency to put all the de facto states in the former Soviet, on the territories of the former Soviet Union into one group. At the same time, this ultimately obscures the many differences that they have. Even though they do exist in the arguably similar geopolitical environment, these entities are not at all similar. They have different internal landscape, they have different logic, how these conflicts have been developing, and so on. Finally, one of the leading scholars on de facto states, Scott Peck, also argues that highlights a failure to appreciate the de facto state's diversity. So in my paper, I draw on these various criticism, these lines of criticism of the de facto state scholars, and argue that while many studies tend to look at this geopolitical level at the external factors of de facto states' development and sustainability, or on the internal dimension of their sustainability, it is the dynamics between them that deserves closer scholarly attention. So I argue that there is a need to further examine the development of de facto states based on their statehood aspirations and different attitudes towards their patrons. In particular, I will bring in the examples of Transnistria and the self-proclaimed Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republic that have openly declared their intention to join the Russian Federation rather than to build a separate statehood. However, I say that the processes that unfold under this idea of statehood as a transitory state or statehood as a necessary evil rather than the ultimate goal per se, overlooked, and little is known how different the development of these entities actually is compared to the de facto states which aspire to be independent and so on. So I will start with the external factors of the de facto state's survival. So all the post-Soviet de facto states that I consider they're all a product of wars. In some cases, like in Transnistria, the war ended a long time ago and the resumption of hostilities is at least considered to be unlikely. In other cases, if we take the example of the so-called Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republic, the war has never stopped. So the hostilities have been going on ever since the conflict erupted in 2014. And the fighting periodically resumed. So all in all de facto states in the post-Soviet space are in a very fragile position, which makes them highly dependent on their patrons. As a result, this long-lasting viability of de facto states can be said to be first and foremost the result of the support coming from the patron states, primarily Russia, for all of the cases, with the exception of Nagorno-Karabakh, where the role of Russia has also increased after the Second Karabakh War. So this almost total dependence of secessionist regions on their patron states for physical and economic survival is exemplified in several directions. So in economic terms, just to give an example, more than 90% of South Ossetia's budget comes from Russia. Around 60% of the trade turnover of Abkhazia is with Russia. Russia is the main provider of social benefits and pensions of these territories. Russia is also militarily present, for example, in Transnistria, in Abkhazia, which is also considered to be a protection against the possible irredentism on the side of the parent states of these entities. At the same time, despite this big dependence of these entities on their parent states, it would be a mistake to say that the way how they develop and how they shape internally is determined only by the patron states. As Nina Kaspersen argues, they're not just mere puppets in the hands of external players, and there is a great degree of fluidity in the relations between patron states and de facto states. And in fact, the relations between them are not void of tensions either. For example, there were some disputes between Abkhazia and Russia regarding the property rights of Abkhaz and Russian citizens. We see the attempts of Transnistria to decrease its dependence on Russia in economic terms and so on. So the de facto states, the post-Soviet de facto states are not deprived of agency, and that they are able to shape to a certain extent the internal landscape on the territories where they are. So when it comes to the internal factors of their sustainability, it's necessary to, like, as I said, and I think I echo a bit the presenter that we had on the first day, that de facto states are not deprived of agency, and the fact that even though they exist in very similar geopolitical environment, they are all very much different speaks to that as well. So this de facto states present different grounds for secessionism. So in the case of Abkhazia, there are some ethnic claims which are made. In the case of Transnistria, we see the remedial right of secession, where the de facto authorities of Transnistria argue about the allegedly discriminatory actions of the Moldovan government. We see that internally they're also very different. So in some cases, like in Transnistria or in Abkhazia, there are elections held, there are transit of power that takes place, while in others, let's say the so-called Donetsk and Luhansk People's Republics, these de facto states represent highly repressive machines which rely on repression and coercion primarily to cement and sustain secessionism. So while these differences are discussed, what is overlooked, I argue, is the diversity in the final statehood aspirations of these entities and how this influences their development and the internal landscape. So among the many de facto states in the post-Soviet space, there are at least 3 of them. Possibly the 2 of them might unite in the future, at least it looks like the process is underway. So it's Transnistria, then the so-called Donetsk People's Republic and the so-called Luhansk People's Republic. So the 3 entities in the post-Soviet space that have openly declared their aspirations to join Russia rather than to be independent per se. So for these entities, this de facto statehood in which they exist is more like a necessary evil rather than as a goal per se. So at the same time, and I'm coming to an end, I say that a closer look into how these aspirations of these entities, how the fact that these 3 de facto states do not per se aspire to be independent, but rather aim to join the Russian Federation, how does it influence their development? So this is the question that remains overlooked. So, and as I said in my presentation, I will more like open the puzzle rather than answer it, but I'll be very happy to have feedback and to answer your questions. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for your presentation. It was shorter than the 17 minutes, for sure. I think we will leave the question and answers for the end of the panel. So we can proceed to Çağlar.
Çağlar, yes.
Çağlar, finally, Ezikoğlu, which is going to present us a paper on the former journalist to populist politician, Pashinyan and Armenia. So I give you the floor.
Thank you so much. First, I would like to thank for all the participants of this conference and for our panel. Today, I will talk about the populism in Armenia. Maybe some of you saw this title, may be surprised, because I am not an Armenian expert. I am an expert on the Turkish politics and the Middle Eastern politics. Maybe you ask why you choose this topic. When I saw the news about the Armenian politics and when I saw the news about the Armenian elections in June 2021, I saw that the Civic Contract party, who is the Pashinyan's party, won about 54% of the votes in the election. I surprised it because during the Nagorno-Karabakh war and after the war, we can see the heavy protest movements against the Pashinyan and the Pashinyan's government. Most of the opinion polls or most of the scholars couldn't believe that how the Pashinyan won this election. And I started to think about we need to understand the popularity of the Pashinyan in Armenian politics. And I saw the populist strategies after the Pashinyan came to power with the Velvet Revolution in 2018. And the first I need to give the information about the Pashinyan's life, because you can see the title is from the journalist, because the Pashinyan, when he began to study journalism at Yerevan State University when he was 16, and when he was a student, he reported the news for the print media and entered the politics when he was at the 23, and he coordinated the campaign of one of the presidential candidates in the 1998 election. Sorry, and as a result of this election campaigns, his activity as a journalist is hard to distinguish from his political activism. This is an important issue for understanding the Pashinyan's interest in the Armenian politics. This is an important issue. And in 2007, he founded the Impeachment Alliance, which called for the resignations of the President Robert Kocharyan and his prime minister. And the alliance won only 1% of the vote in the 2007 election. But we can see that the first notion of the Pashinyan's popularity in the Armenia. And the Pashinyan then joined the electoral team of its leader, Levan Petrosyan, against the Kocharyans in the 2009. And during this period, the Pashinyan joined many protest movements against the Kocharyans government. And in the 2009, I think he was imprisoned by the government. And after the 2013, Pashinyan decided to create a new political movement in Armenian politics. And this was named as the Civic Contract, and the Civic Contract became a political party in 2015 and joined the Way Out Alliance for the 2017 election, in which Pashinyan was elected as a member of the parliament. And in the 2018, we can see the revolutionary movements against the Sarkisyan's leadership in Armenia. And after this revolution, the Pashinyan controlled the whole Armenia after this situation. And when we look at this slide, yes, it's possible to understand how the Pashinyan came from the journalism to the politics in the Armenia. But we need to understand the Pashinyan's the popularity. And as I said, we couldn't see any detailed literature about the populism in the Armenia. I think when I started to search about this topic, I saw the two important contradictory issues for understanding why the Pashinyan couldn't identify as populist. The first is the Pashinyan always opposed the notion of the ideology for his political movement or for his political party. So if we look at another populist cases, we can see the notion of nationalism in the countries, in the cases in Europe, in other case studies. But if you look at the Pashinyan case or the Pashinyan's party, we couldn't see any notion of the ideology when he came to power in 2018. And one of the speech, I especially looked at the speech or the Pashinyan's discourses in my research. One of his speeches in the party conference in June 2019, he underlined that. He said, "We are neither liberals nor centrists nor social democrats. We are only a citizens' party, which means that we place ourselves beyond ideological standards." So we can see the lack of ideology in the Armenian case. This is the first maybe contradictory issue. But after the Nagorno-Karabakh war, we can see the first notion about the increasing trend of the nationalism and the Pashinyan's leadership. Another problematic or the paradoxical feature of the Pashinyan's populism is about his approach to the liberal democratic ideas. Because when he came to power, he always used this liberal democracy. But when we look at another cases of the populism, the populism of or the populist parties or the populist leaders always oppose the liberal democratic values. On the other hand, when we look at the Armenian case, during the Velvet Revolution, most of the liberal democratic institutions or the open society foundations, like George Soros, always support the Pashinyan and his movements. But when we look at, for example, Hungary, you know, in the Viktor Orban's populist leadership, we can see the opposing of the Open Society Foundations, Soros, or another actors, liberal actors. So these are another second, maybe the contradictory issue. But when we look at another issues in the Armenian politics, we can see completely the different picture. The first populist strategy for the Pashinyan is the polarization strategy. This is an important. When we look at the 2018 local elections, during the local elections in the Yerevan, in the capital city, the Pashinyan said that during the election campaign, one of his speech, he said that, yes, the situation in Armenia is very clear. There are white forces, there are black forces, and I want to officially announce we are the white forces, and all others who don't want us to succeed are the black forces. So this is important for understanding the main the populist strategy, which is the polarization. And if you look at the Armenian politics, you can see this polarization strategy which implemented by the Pashinyan, who always said that, okay, we are white forces who are the support of the Velvet Revolution in 2018. And another actors in the Armenian politics, especially who supported by the Russia, is always seen as a blacks. Especially if we look at the populist strategies, we can see the anti-elitism. This is an important notion. Always the populist leaders, the populist parties always claim that, yes, we are opposing of the elites in the politics. And the Pashinyan especially try to use it. According to Pashinyan, the Sarkisyan's governments always identified as the former elites, and the Pashinyan always criticized the corruption scandals during the Sarkisyan's period, and he always used these actors to polarize the Armenian society. These are another important notion for understanding the Pashinyans, the populism. And another issue for understanding the Pashinyan's populism is about his personal integrity of the regime. This is important for understanding the Pashinyan's the personal leadership. If you look at his, as I said, behaviors in the politics, we can see some contradictory statements against another actors, opposition parties, etc. Spectacular selfies, especially the Pashinyan would like to use the social media. As I said, I'm not an expert about the Armenian politics, but if you look at another populist leaders, always most of them prefer to use the Twitter. But I started to search about Armenian politics. The Pashinyan would prefer to use the Facebook rather than Twitter. And maybe you can see during the Nagorno-Karabakh war, the important statements always declared from the Pashinyan's Facebook account. And he always used the Facebook, especially to contact with the younger generation of the Armenian politics. This is an important strategy to use the social media. Another strategy is the exaggeration of the minor successes as the major achievements. We can see this issue in the coronavirus pandemic in Armenia that I will mention, and a dubious record of the social economic progress. These are another issue. Another populist strategy is sometimes the Pashinyan try to use the speech against another powers in the state. Most of maybe the hate speech against another actors is to the constitutional courts and constitutional courts judges in Armenia, especially during the coronavirus pandemic. Constitutional courts decided some important issues against the Pashinyan's governments, And one of his speeches in the April 19 in the 2020, I think, he exceeded himself with statements that include the constitutional court of the coronavirus and whimpering the judges and lynched the judges in the streets. And when I completed his speech in the Facebook, he said, yes, the people are our chef. The people are our director. The people are our king, and the people are the supreme power in the Armenia. So I think we can see very similar sentences if we look at another populist case studies, like in Venezuela, like in Europe, Hungary, like in another countries. So these are important strategies when I started to search about the Pashinyan's populism. Another issue, as I said, during the coronavirus pandemic, the Pashinyan governments always declared that, yes, we are successful to combat the fighting of the coronavirus pandemic. But especially during this period, the Pashinyan's government not be able to manage with the coronavirus pandemic effectively. And interestingly, rather than to fight, combating with the pandemic, the Pashinyan's governments try to reduce or try to fight against the opposition movements rather than fighting the pandemic, the COVID-19 pandemic. And we can see some important laws, regulations against opposition political parties during the COVID-19 process. These are another maybe important issue for understanding, for exploring how the Pashinyan try to control the governments, try to control the whole party and try to reduce the opposition political movements role in the Armenian society. Another issue for the populist leaders is try to control the whole the mechanisms in the state. And when Pashinyan came to power, he always appointed the important actors that he come to support from them in the soldiers, in the military powers, in the courts, in the judiciary, in another state institutions. And when I started to search, I saw these populist strategies. And as a result of his, as I said, especially the charismatic position in the younger generation in Armenia, due to his clash with the former elites in Armenia, he always continued with his popularity in Armenian politics. As I said, this is completely new research for me. I wrote a book chapter as in Turkish. Hopefully it will be published within a month, and I will hopefully plan to publish a full-length research article in English. So your comments, your questions are so valuable for me. Thanks for your attention, and welcome, very welcome your questions and comments about my new research paper. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Just on time, actually. I'd like to confirm that so Bezen and Arash are not present in the room with some other name or login system. No, so we will move on to Javadbay Khalilzada. I hope I'm
Khalilzada, yes.
Okay. And the presentation is going to be on the survival strategy of the small states, multi-vector foreign policy of Azerbaijan, and the Second Karabakh War. So the floor is yours, please.
Thank you, Professor. So I thank to the organizers for organizing this conference and accepting my paper to present. So let me share my screen. See, is it works? Can you see?
Yes, it would be better if you make it full screen, so presentation mode.
Yes, yes. Okay. Let me.
Yeah, that was correct. Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Great. This was the paper that I am trying to finish and publish it, and unfortunately, I have to stop, like postpone it due to my candidacy exam. So it is unfinished paper. So it would be great for your reviews and comments to build my paper. So as the other second Karabakh War, Azerbaijan, as if I am not wrong and make a mistake, the only post-Soviet and small state in the international politics that encountered great powers and conducted military operations to deoccupy or liberate. From the Azeri perspective, it is a liberation. From Armenian perspective, it is the occupation their territory. So maybe this, apart from these perspectives, I will say liberate or deoccupy. So what the research, my research question is how small states survive in international politics. In this international politics, particularly, I consider international politics anarchical. Well, I also understand that it is comes how you see it, anarchy, what states make of it also. But however, in the next slide, I will show the South Caucasus. It is really anarchical region of the world, probably. So I will have literature review, cross case study, Armenia and Georgia. I explain Azerbaijan with Armenia and Georgia because when we compare, Azerbaijan's survival is can be understood better. So time limit of the study is 1991, 2021 or 20. It can be tracing Azerbaijan foreign policy that resulted achievement in the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict. So it is the map of the I'm sorry. It is the map of the South Caucasus. As we can see, Georgia have two secessionist conflict, and almost they declared their independence, and Russia and some small states, Venezuela, recognized their independence. There is, we can see Nagorno-Karabakh, Armenian occupied territories. Also, we can see like a small, it is autonomous, Nagorno-Karabakh autonomous oblast from the Soviet period, and 7 adjacent regions. Anyway, I'm sorry. So Russia in the north, Iran in the south, and Turkey in the west, like great powers that compete over this region, and none of these countries could be seen as a liberal and democratic, and they trust their powers in their foreign policy. As Turkey activities in Middle East and North Africa, Iran, almost all the surrounded countries, Iran have some groups that support it, and Russia, we know that Russia occupied parts of Georgia, Crimea, Ukraine, and so on. So therefore, I use like a anarchical, accept anarchical, because the region is anarchic. And so from the realist perspective, small states examine that either they bandwagon against great aggressive great power, or balance, or as Morgenthau, I put quote from Morgenthau, small nations have always owed their independence either balance of power or to the preponderance of one protecting power, or their lack of attractiveness for imperialist aspirations. So I think that like it fits to the region and regional countries. So let me, okay. So now, if I focus to these 3 regional countries, Armenian foreign policy objective is protect sovereignty and security of Armenia against Turkey and Azerbaijan. Therefore, Armenia aligned with Russia and Collective Security Treaty Organization for security, particularly after taking control of the Nagorno-Karabakh. And security and recognition of Armenians of Nagorno-Karabakh in terms of peaceable solution or resolution of the conflict, recognition of Armenian massacre as a genocide in the, I don't want to dive into this because it is not very objective of this paper. So as a foreign policy objective, one is sovereignty and security of Armenia and recognition of Nagorno-Karabakh as Armenia or people of Armenian independence or unification with Armenia. And where we are after 30 years, therefore Armenia aligned with Russia and Collective Security Treaty Organization. So where we now, after following Karabakh War, even some scholars and political scientists argued that are particularly Gerard Liberdian, Armenian former advisor, aide to president, and also historian. He said that at the moment, Armenia almost like with the same level with Abkhazia, fully dependent from Russia for their independence, and also it is of course his comment for following Second Karabakh War. Maybe conditions now transform in Armenia, lost the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War, Russia didn't help, or Russia's aid was not enough to support Armenia, and dependent from Russia, and as I said, sovereignty is threatened. Georgian case, Georgia chooses to align with West and NATO, integrate to NATO to secure its sovereignty and autonomy over its breakaway regions. However, as we saw in 2008, West didn't help or help it, but not enough to protect Georgia. Or yes, still there is a West and American support on Georgia against these breakaway regions. But since there is a Russian recognition in these territories and Russian military in these regions, it will be very hard for even for the West that to encounter Russia in hard power terms to deoccupy Georgian territories. And as a foreign policy objective for Azerbaijan is definitely protect sovereignty and security of Azerbaijan and assert control and sovereignty of the state on Nagorno-Karabakh and adjacent occupied territories. So along with Nagorno-Karabakh in 1990s, Azerbaijan lost also 7 adjacent. Some of them not was full control, but at least there was some part of the 7 adjacent regions also occupied by Armenian forces. And what did Azerbaijan follow it? For instance, unlike Georgia and Armenia, Azerbaijan didn't align or go to official alignment, one of the vectors, like either Russia and West. In Azerbaijan, they say that it is balanced foreign policy, but I don't think it is a balanced. If it is balanced, you need to increase your integration with one of the rivals, like Armenia and Georgia did. I think it is like a as one of the his speech, Aliyev said that we are following independent foreign policy, and we want to don't give our sovereignty neither great powers, neither of the West nor Russia. So, for instance, in terms of energy and transit, Azerbaijan definitely like a support or align with EU. For instance, all transit routes, energy routes pass from Azerbaijan and through Georgia and Turkey, which also the railway like Baku, Tbilisi, Kars railway is very strategic and important that bypass both Iran and Russia and link best with Central Asia and China. So Azerbaijan have very strategic relation with United Kingdom and Italy, particularly in the last Karabakh War. These two countries and also I will come prevented any United Nations Security Council like a I'm sorry. So Security Council cannot comment on put sanction on Azerbaijan, call Azerbaijan to stop its military activities due to United Kingdom. So Azerbaijan built very strategic relations in security and also in military with Turkey, Israel, and Pakistan, which the country bought between 1910 and 1915. The country bought all close to 6 billion armaments from Israel, which included air defense systems that the country used in Second Karabakh War, and also drones, like advanced weapons, armaments that Armenia several times condemned Israel to that these technologies used against Armenians. So, and membership to non-aligned movements. With through this membership, Azerbaijan promoted its position in this movement, and also it is the second movement as the United Nations, like organization that countries included. So this get support these countries in United Nations general resolutions. So Azerbaijan built east-west and south-north transit routes also that connect Iran and Russia and India comes from there, and also east-west, as I said before. So and what was this like non-aligned foreign policy objective during the Second Nagorno-Karabakh War? And I should also highlight that the case of Nagorno-Karabakh is very rare cases that all the US, Russia, and European countries, France particularly, like oppose like a major, like Azerbaijan, which, for instance, in case of secessionism in Georgia, Moldova, Ukraine, all these countries have strong, except Russia, US and France have strong support for Georgia and Moldova and Ukraine demand Russian withdrawal of Russian forces. But in the case of Nagorno-Karabakh, they don't show this support to Azerbaijan, and therefore Azerbaijani authorities several times blame the West for double standard. Following Nagorno-Karabakh, the geopolitical and also position of Azerbaijan also transformed. It now shows stable and consolidated sovereignty. For instance, there is a recent ongoing tensions between Azerbaijan and Iran that Nagorno-Karabakh also showed the position of the Azerbaijani Turks inside of the Iran and their strong support for Azerbaijan that threatened Iran. And also Turkey's as a main player in the South Caucasus, the result of Nagorno-Karabakh, and Israel as a main actor in Azerbaijan. So now, Azerbaijan conducted like a visit of the foreign embassies and to Shusha. You can see like it is close to Stepanacert, Khanchandi, or Shusha, the orange one city, which Armenians says that it is historical city of the Armenians. A culture. So Azerbaijan also tried to promote this recognition, the result of this Second Karabakh War, and also one main factor that until the Second Karabakh War, Azerbaijan offered the highest de facto status to the Armenians of the Nagorno-Karabakh, which they said that several times it was stated, and there is a documents that I can share that what is the highest like autonomy Azerbaijan can provide. But now Azerbaijan authorities says that there is no status quo. Azerbaijan like the occupied territories, and Armenians are invited to be the ethnic minorities like lesbians, Talysh, Tats live in Azerbaijan. So Azerbaijan also changed this like peace talks resolutions that offered since 1990s, and there is no status quo thinking by Azerbaijan. So what is the wider regional and global implications of this Second Karabakh War? And one of the trilateral agreements between Russia, Armenia, and Azerbaijan, the link between Nakhchivan and Azerbaijan mainland. So if these routes are if it will be opened, so it means that for Azerbaijan, Azerbaijan will get link contact to it is autonomous Nakhchivan and Turkey and to the west. So these regional developments, these are on development process. As I said, some talks about Armenia sovereignty, because Armenia following the Second Karabakh War became very dependent from the Russia. And but now there is ongoing negotiation between Turkey and Armenia, opening borders and transit routes between these two countries. It can change, but what these 30 years after Soviet Union shows from the anarchical point for small states, well, I think that Azerbaijani case presents that instead of aligning with any great powers, it is better to like build multi-vectoral foreign policy, which saved Azerbaijan from condemnation of the or sanctions from United Nations Security Council members, and also, for instance, at the moment there is a reconstruction projects in the occupied territories. Italy and Israel and United Kingdom highly like interested and conducting projects in these occupied territories, which means that these countries also several times made clear their support to Azerbaijan. So this the Second Nagorno-Karabakh and the case of the Azerbaijan shows that small state, it is a better for small states to stay independent rather than align in other great powers or blocks. Thank you. It's the end of my presentation.
Very well, thank you very much. I wonder if any of the presenters missing are here. Bezen, Balamir, Koskun. or Azash? No. Okay, very well. Then we'll proceed to the debates. We have plenty of time for it, about 1 hour actually. No, sorry, about 30 minutes, 25 minutes. So I will start by giving the floor to Faik Hassan, who raised his hand.
Yes, sir. Thank you. I hope I'm audible.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Sir, my question is for Khalilzada. Recently presented a paper. You consider the situation of the region as anarchical, based on the perception that powers in the region like Turkey, Russia, and Iran are not democratic or liberal. So I would like your comments on 3 points I would like to raise here. Is it necessary to be democratic and liberal to achieve self-interest? I mean, you have the example of US. They pursue a hawkish foreign policy. Second, isn't it that it's small states' own foreign policy that won the support as far as Kosovo issue is concerned? Third, Russia is never involved in the conflict full-fledged. So isn't it that they played a role of stabilizing factor? Russia played a role as a stabilizer in the region between the war of Armenia and Azerbaijan. So I would like your comments on these 3 points. Thank you.
Excuse me. Could you repeat your second question? I didn't get it.
Yes. My second point is that, isn't its small states' own foreign policy, its own foreign objectives that won the sport, that led to their win in the war? But I mean, it is not that external factors were involved. It was a small state's own foreign policy that won the support from Turkey or Pakistan or whatever the states were involved.
Okay.
My point is towards Azerbaijan.
Okay. Okay, I see. So, for your question, like liberal, for instance, the small states case in EU as liberal project is different in other parts of the world. Therefore, I said that I see anarchical the region. In the case of the American hawkish foreign policy, it is like the American hawkish policy based on liberal, like expansion of the liberal values, democracy promotion. So, and also the case of the America is a great power or superpower. So it is not very binded with even the invasion of the Iraq and discussion on in United Nations and some like great powers objection like Germany and Russia. So the case of the America is maybe a bit unique or not very related to the small power politics because it's superpower. Your second case, yes, there was some news that Azerbaijan conducted these military operations alone, but yes, Armenians shared some videos. For instance, myself, I showed that the videos and fighters that they share it. I can share this photo if you want you as well. That as Syrian or Turkish fighters, but later Armenian defense ministry met with soldiers in the front line, and the same uniform that they presented as a Syrian mercenaries was in the soldiers that met with the Armenian defense minister, and later they removed the photo from their website. Well, Turkey involved it, as I said, and also Israel could be involved, as I said, because the occupation of the territories along the Iranian border give the long border with Iran, and Iranian Azerbaijanis that they can conduct like their intelligence. So, but they didn't involve with fighting at the local level. So I have interviewed with several fighters during this conflict, and particularly special forces. Yes, there was definitely I also have an interview with the spokesperson of the Defense Ministry of Azerbaijan. He said that we didn't have any Turkish or Pakistani high military or military involved at the local level to fight it. And I am telling what they told me, so I don't know what is the deep in the operations also, and also I cannot speculate. So what he told that, yes, we almost like 3 decades, Turkey and Azerbaijan have the common military operations, common military trainings. So they said that, well, if we look from this perspective, yes, they involved it because they trained us to the NATO standard, but for fighting, they never involved it. Neither Pakistan, even for Pakistan, they put as a strategic partner of Azerbaijan. They don't have very yes, Azerbaijan's try to purchase some fighter jets from Pakistan, but it is not like Israel relations as Israel. So there is some small amount of economic relations between these two countries. I am also wondering where come this. There is a strategic relations between Pakistan and Azerbaijan. So there is no material forces to support this discourse. I hope I responded your questions.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you. Let me give the word to someone else, also raising his hand. Urban Jaxa.
Yes, thank you. Wonderful presentations. I have actually questions for everyone, but I'll just ask one to Katsiaryna, if I may. I really liked the title of your presentation. I liked the part on creeping absorption. If I understand it correctly, it's a play on creeping recognition. There was a fear of parent states because of the engagement of third parties. And my question is, what do you consider to be specific to post-Soviet de facto states, except for the obvious things such as geography and history? In other words, if we look at agency and dependence on the patron, what justifies the continued grouping together and comparison of these 4 entities?
Yeah, thank you very much for the question. So what's specific about these entities? Well, in my research, I focus on 3 of them, Donetsk, Luhansk, and Transnistria. And so even at the beginning of my short presentation, I already argued against the homogenization of these entities. And this is what I really stem from, that even though we kind of talk about the post-Soviet group, but I think it becomes more and more difficult to kind of put them together in many aspects just because they develop so differently and dynamically. And we see that new states appear, like Donetsk and Luhansk, so-called People's Republics. Right, so what unites them except for the Russian factor, if I may put it like that, and history? Well, in my research, I say that actually not a lot, because they all take very different development paths. They also have very different internal dynamics, what's happening inside. They have different types of relations with their patron states as well. So some are more dependent, some try to balance, like Transnistria, right, which is less dependent on Russia than other post-Soviet states. Because of the deep and comprehensive free trade agreement with the European Union. They also have very different types of relations with the parent states, right? So we see that Moldova and Transnistria get on quite well, while other de facto states have more issues in their relations. So it's difficult to say because I think my perspective is like they are more different than similar in that case. But of course, there are some background factors that in a way unite them and bring them together in the research.
Can I just ask a quick follow-up question? What is your definition that you're using of a de facto state? And especially, does it include, for instance, one of the definitions most used is Nina Casperson's definition that also has a part on that these are entities that have demonstrated the willingness to achieve full independence. And I would argue that in the cases of Luhansk and Donetsk People's Republics, but also in the case of South Ossetia, this is not the case. So I'm just wondering what your definition is.
Yes, thanks for the question. Yes, in general, I am following Nina Casperson's definition, but I just differently interpret this independence moment because they still aspire for independence, but independence seems to be, as I said, like a necessary evil or transitory stage, right, on the pathway of joining Russia. So in a way, it's like becoming independent from a parent state and then joining their patron state. So I do follow this definition, but I have a lot of but because of the case studies as well, because Donetsk and Luhansk are also quite specific. So in a way, following Nina Casperson's definition, they do fit. I can call them de facto states, but again, given that there is no defined borders at this point and the contact line is unstable, they do not fit into the definition. So yes, it's a very nuanced definition, but largely, yes, I do follow her perspective.
Thank you.
Very well. I will give the word to Raman Dag.
Hi, thank you very much for your presentation, and each one of them actually interesting. And so I have one question for each presenter, if we have enough time to ask. Katsiaryna, I don't know, the pronunciation might be wrong, but I'm wondering about how can you place Kosovo into your theoretical background? Because, okay, you can say that it's not a post-Soviet area, but I think it is. But it is already recognized by by most of the European countries, but Russia still does not recognize its independence. So, and the Kosovo really changed its side from the Russian perspective to its Western perspective. So I'm just wondering about how do you evaluate the political position of Kosovo in terms of the post-Soviet de facto states? And the next question, I would like to ask Çağlar Ezikoğlu. Thank you for the presentation. It was really interesting, but we all know that after the Pashinyan declared that they are gonna surrender it unconditional and signed an agreement with Azerbaijan with the mediation of Russia. So after that, most of the people, they are just criticized, and even some protesters try to get the General Assembly, if I am not remembering correctly. So if you consider him and his discourse as a populist, so after this sort of criticism, so how do you think that he could re-elected in the next election? So if we say that, okay, of course he used the populist discourse, and that's why he managed to get re-elected by the people in the last election. So could you please elaborate on this much more, because I think that it needs to be a little bit extended. And the last question for the Javadbay Khalilzada. I really understand your point. Okay, Azerbaijan choose the path for multi-vectoral foreign policy, but I think you haven't mentioned that it's about the natural resources they have, and so they could afford to conduct multifactorial foreign policy, because we could see that the United Arab Emirates, they have oil and resources. Qatar, I don't think if they didn't have the natural resources or the enough economic power, so they would be that much influential in current politics. So Armenia does not have the natural resources or enough economic power to conduct the multivectoral foreign policy, but Azerbaijan does. So why didn't you add that perspective in your research? That's my last question. Thank you very much.
Very well.
Thanks a lot. So then I'll go first. Well, Kosovo is definitely out of my direct research focus, because it's not, I cannot see the way how it can be called a post-Soviet de facto state, because by post-Soviet de facto states, we mean de facto states located on the territories of the former Soviet Union. So it's really out of the picture. But of course, the Kosovo, the role that the recognition of Kosovo played is also, this is something that I can not directly, but indirectly comes into play in my research as well. Also, Nina Kaspersen wrote extensively on that, what impact the recognition of Kosovo by the West had. Of course, this impact is in a way twofold. It influenced the position of Russia on de facto states in the post-Soviet space. So we saw the recognition of Abkhazia, South Ossetia, which was a direct kind of response to the recognition of Kosovo, arguably. At the same time, it also had an impact on the de facto states, post-Soviet de facto states themselves. So then it's difficult to say how exactly it has influence, because in some cases in the South Caucasus, instead of hoping for instead of maybe inspiring hopes for independence, the research shows that vice versa, this has produced the opposite effect, and that so these de facto states actually in the South Caucasus, after the recognition of Kosovo, they gave up on their independence claims, recognition claims, not independent recognition claims. Yeah, so it's not really in my research focus, and I don't know how it can be included into the group of post-Soviet space. What's behind that? Hope this answers the question.
Yes, second is mine, I think. Thanks to Rahman for his question and comments about it. The first thing, I think, if you look at the developments after the Nagorno-Karabakh war, the protest movement is not accused to only the member of the parliaments. Yes, we can see the protest movements against the assembly, but you know, the government was controlled by the Pashinyan's party, Civic Contract party. And if you watch the news after this protest movements, I think one of them is after the declaration of the agreement between Armenia and Azerbaijan after the war, the Pashinyans, especially a group of the unknown people, maybe some of them come from the opposition parties, posted a video and they especially broke into the government residence. They entered into the Pashinyan's office and they stole some items from the Pashinyan's office. So we can see especially the Pashinyans, not only the member of the parliaments. So this is an important issue when I saw it. Okay, people were angry at the Pashinyan and Pashinyan's government, but how they would vote? You asked me, I understood your question. What is your evidence to understand the Pashinyan's popularity? When we look at especially the opinion polls or another search about the Pashinyan's popularity, we can see the increasing support of the younger generation, because the younger generation in Armenia especially are not satisfied with the previous governments, the Sarkisyan's governments, because during the Sarkisyan period, we can see the corruption scandals, we can see the high unemployment rates, and the Pashinyan declared before during the election campaigns, Pashinyan always declared that, okay, we need to fight against, okay, we need to improve our economic conditions, we need to fight against the corruption scandals. And the younger generation of the Armenia always supported the Pashinyan. And he always used, as I said, the social media, which was used most of the younger generation in Armenia. Always, for example, sometimes took a selfie with the youngs in Armenia. And the younger generation especially liked this, rather than the Sarkisyans, the policies in Armenia. So when we look at, as I said, some statistical surveys, we can see the youngs, special attitudes to the Pashinyan's populist policies. This is maybe the answer. And I found many, as I said, the polls or surveys about the Pashinyan's popularity, but we don't have any time to discuss all issues for this. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Rahman, for your question. Yes, it is the important point in Azerbaijani case that Azerbaijan have difference from the other two countries, but Kocharyan, former Armenian president, once said that if Azerbaijan have a natural resources, Armenia have a diaspora. So yes, it is a accepted reality, but Armenia have a large diaspora in the US and in France, in Australia. So I think that this diaspora have influential role in Armenian politics, and also they invest and financially support Armenia. While Armenia have no natural resources, Armenia have a diaspora. Azerbaijan have not such strong diaspora. In case of Georgia, yes, but for instance, the case of Georgia is very strategic. It has the routes to seas and also routes to Europe. So I agree I accept your point, but I think that, for instance, due to 20 January, there is in 1990s, there was a strong, aggressive, enmity towards Russia. And even it is, for instance, while Russia deployed its peace keeping forces in Nagorno-Karabakh, there is public anger towards Russia. So I think that unlike this public anger towards Russia, Azerbaijan never chose to oppose to Russia openly, like Saakashvili did. I believe that maybe more than this natural resources, the case of the regime in Azerbaijan should be included to the foreign policy choices. Yes, resources give the financial freedom to the regime, but also in Azerbaijan, with aligning any West or Russia, it also means that depending the regime, one of these blocks. So as Ilham Aliyev does not want to be dependent from either Russia, from the West, because in his I use also his speeches, he several times opposed that we cannot accept all Western values, democracy definitely included, and also we cannot give our independence to any country, for instance, like being member of the Eurasian Economic Union, Russian-led economic union, alternative to EU. So I think that, yes, I accept your point. Financial, like abundance of resources and finance give independence for Azerbaijan, to give freedom to Azerbaijan to conduct independent foreign policy. However, I think also more than that it is related to survival also Ilham Aliyev. Because putting eggs to one basket means that you are dependent from this, and Aliyev through playing bit, even for Turkey, Aliyev never, yes, he supports integration with Turkic world, but he never puts himself dependent from any other country that influence to internal politics of Azerbaijan. I hope I like answered to your question.
Thank you very much. It's fine.
I think Çağlar raised his hand first. Yes, okay.
Can I ask a question, Javadbay? Thanks for this very interesting presentation. I wonder that about the role of domestic politics or the change in the domestic politics about the survival strategies of the small states, because you mentioned after 30 years the Armenia dependent from the Russia, but you know we can see the Pashinyan's government after the 2018, or in Georgia we can see the two blocks or the two actors, one actor always supported by the Russia, another parts always supported by the Western powers, United States, like from the Saakashvili. But in the Azerbaijan, we couldn't see any powerful actors. Do you think that the political plurality is advantage or the disadvantage for the small states survival strategy? I especially worked on the political survival theories for the Turkish politics, for the Turkey, but I wonder that about the role of domestic politics. Thank you so much.
You are welcome, Dr. Çağlar. Yes, thank you for your question. Yes, I think that domestic politics of Azerbaijan is like authoritarian. We should highlight it, but maybe plurality creates dependence from the outsiders. For instance, in case of before the second Nagorno-Karabakh war, there was a public debate in Azerbaijan that we should ban all Russian language schools. So there is some schools that in Russian language Azerbaijan, and they, like all opposition parties in Azerbaijan, a bit more nationalistic than current government, while they prefer to integration with West, EU, but their parties are not also democratic. So I mean opposition parties. So I think that in the case of Azerbaijan, even both West and Russia sees that alternatives are more like not ready to work with. For instance, Russia definitely understands that Russia didn't want it to be this result in Nagorno-Karabakh. But Russia definitely understands that the alternative to Ilham Aliyev in Azerbaijan is totally Western-oriented government, which will put in danger Russian position in South Caucasus totally. So Russia does not want it. So even there was in 2013 elections, Russia created some billionaires from Azerbaijan to challenge Ilham Aliyev, but it realized that it is even people in Azerbaijan also not support Russia with integration to Russian-oriented, Russian-led organization. So, I say in some opposition in Azerbaijan and some political scholars says that Aliyev dependent from Russia in survival, but material that in my hand shows that actually Putin and Russia is more dependent from Aliyev for Azerbaijan than Aliyev dependent from them. So my reading Aliyev and Russian relation in this direction. As I said, there are not alternative like a strong political party in Azerbaijan that West could invest it. And also since Azerbaijan support transit and energy routes that bypass Russia, challenge Russia, and support the Western interest in the region. So for now, the West have no problem with Aliyev. Therefore, they it also helps to survival of the Aliyev and also independence of the Azerbaijan. Thank you. I hope I replied to I answered your question.
Very well. Thank you very much. I think Urban also would like to make a question, a comment.
Yeah, I'll try to be very brief.
Yes,
so my
please.
question is for Çağlar and Javadbay. Basically, what are, in your opinion, the prospects of opening the Turkish-Armenian border during the term in office of Pashinyan and Erdogan? And what are the remaining obstacles in that aspect?
Okay.
Maybe I will say maybe briefly think about the Turkey and Armenia relations, because Javadbay mentioned about the new the negotiations between the Turkey and the Armenia. It's so strategical if you look at the relations, especially the border relations between these two countries. But I think another important issue, the Turkey try to change this foreign policy agenda, especially after the Biden elected as a president in the United States. Because before this day, we can see the increasing trend of the nationalism in the Turkey in both domestic and the foreign policy. And during the Nagorno-Karabakh war, if we watch the Turkish domestic policy, the news in the media, we can see this increasing trend about the nationalism. But interestingly, from the last month, we can see the negotiations between the Turkey and Armenia. I think this is about the changing trend of the Turkish foreign policy, but it's my opinion.
Thank you for your question. So briefly, when Turkey closed its borders with Armenia following the region outside Nagorno-Karabakh occupied by Armenian forces, Kalbazar. So formally, there is no any barrier between because following Second Karabakh War, all these regions they occupied, and I believe that Azerbaijani side also want opening of the border, because the only obstacle barrier that formally in constitution, if I am not wrong, Armenian have a territorial claims on Turkey and Azerbaijan. So I think that when Armenia officially denies this, that negate that we don't have any territorial claim on Turkey particularly, I don't think that there is any barrier, since also Pashinyan wants to get dependency relation from Russia and open borders with Turkey is the route for EU for Armenia. So I believe that Pashinyan also wants this. Prospect is that how, for instance, in last 2 days news in Armenia, there was a Turkish plane and landed to Yerevan. There is a strong Russian-supported Katsiaryna and Karabakh Sarkisian clan elites that oppose this opening because they know that this will make a stronger Pashinyan. Therefore, it depends the political, how to say, eagerness of the both parties, I think. But officially, there is no, except Armenian territorial demands, I don't see any barrier.
Very well. Thank you. Thank you very much. Yes, would you like to say something else?
Yes, I have a question to Dr. Çağlar and Katsiaryna.
And we have to finish with that question. Okay, we are on time, but please do it.
Okay, so my question, Dr. Çağlar mentioned about the populism of the Pashinyan, but that he argued that populism increased the led to Pashinyan win in elections. Maybe I understood wrong also, but because main rival of the Pashinyan at the last election was Robert Katsiaryna. Yes, Sarkisyan also was the main rival, but Robert Katsiaryna was seen like a prospective winner of the elections. And more than populism wasn't for instance, in 2008 elections, Katsiaryna, what was the role of this past? I mean, that Katsiaryna ordered shooting protesters in Armenia. What is the role? And also for Katsiaryna, maybe I forgot it, some part you mentioned it. This de facto states that in the post-Soviet states, how is Putin, because if I am not wrong, you said that it is your PhD thesis. How is put the case of Transnistria with Luhansk and Donetsk? Because the case of the political conditions that led to the Transnistria conflict is a bit different from the Luhansk and Donetsk, because it was the Russian direct interest to occupy Ukrainian east, but in the case of Transnistria, Transnistria, it was the case that Moldovan nationalistic policies, change of language policies, integration policies with Romania that lead to the independence. I'm sorry, to the conflict. I am really sorry. Thank you.
Yes, I would like to reply very briefly. I know
yes,
we passed
very briefly.
Very briefly. Okay, we passed the time. As I said, if you look at the Pashinyan's political story, it was started with the protest movements against the Katsiaryna in 2007. And according to the Pashinyan, the Katsiaryna and following President the Sarkisyan are the behind of all corruption scandals, all problems in economy in the Armenia. During the election campaign, okay, we can see the defeat of the Nagorno-Karabakh war, but on the other hand, the Pashinyan always declared that if you vote to the Katsiaryna, the Armenia returned to 2007 or the beginning of 2000s, we returned to corruption scandals, returned to another problems. So these are another important issue. We don't have any time, but this is my quick response. Okay.
Very well. Thank you.
I'll try to be brief as well. Thanks a lot for the question. I'm very happy you asked it, actually, because indeed, you can say the Transnistria and DNR, LNR are really two different generations, I don't know, of the facto states. But surprisingly, there are many similarities between them. I put at the center their aspirations to eventually join Russia rather than be independent as such. But at the same time, very interestingly, there's the state building and the legitimacy claims that they make are very much similar. And this is why I put them together in my research. Because if you look at how they legitimate their claims for independence and then eventually joining Russia, it's all the same. So these are historical arguments about the existence of some states at the beginning of the 20th century, the 1918 Donetsk Kryvyi Rog Republic, or the Moldovan Autonomous Soviet Socialist Republic of 1924. Then in the two cases, the authorities of these three entities present their relations with the parent state through the prism of the fight against fascism. So the Great Patriotic War narrative is something really peculiar to these three cases that also makes sense to unite them. And then in all these cases, they also make claims about the specific socioeconomic conditions peculiarities of this region. So the idea is that Donbass is the heart of Russia, when you know that Donbass feeds Ukraine, that Transnistria is the Riviera of Moldova, and so on. So there are actually many similarities between them, because what I try to look at is how they're being integrated, not only at the level, so not like the Euro integration, but what I'm looking at is how they're being creeping integration into the Ruski Mir, basically the Russian world, right? So yeah, I hope this clarifies. Thanks for the.
Thank you.
Very well. Any other comments? No. Okay. I must thank the presenters. I think in the end it was a very rich panel, and also to the audience and everyone that made some questions. Well, I give this panel as finished, and I hope you continue to enjoy the conference. Have a good day to all.
You too. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you so much.